second shot.
Second shot.
All right, everyone. Let the record show my iPhone 6 clock says it's 5 o'clock. It is Wednesday, April the 14th, and this is the Community Redevelopment Agency Workshop. We will call this meeting to order. Madam Clerk, if I get you to call the roll, please.
I don't have a roll, I apologize.
Arthur Graham.
I didn't get a
Here.
sheet, yeah, Art Graham. Everyone's here, Jeffrey Jones,
Here.
Francis Kowalski. Here. Gary Patel,
Here.
David McGraw.
Here.
We are all here. We're going to skip over old business. Items for discussion. Before we get to items for discussion, we are going to get our CAPE officer up here because we all know the panic that everybody's thinking about the Orange Crush. So, sir, tell us what's going on, or what the plans are, what you're anticipating.
Well, yes, we have heard of it. We knew about it a little bit before all the information had come out. We had already talked to the agency that had it before, the police department that was in the last jurisdiction up in Georgia. So just so everyone in this room knows, we are preparing. We have been preparing. We are going to have ample police officers out here that weekend. As far as with the promoters, at the beginning, we weren't talking to the promoter. The promoter was not talking to us. To be honest with you, we were talking to a couple of people, but everybody was claiming to be the guy. We finally did find who the real person is. They finally did talk to us. Myself and Sergeant Keith Shackelford sat down and talked with these two gentlemen a couple of weeks ago, and they were very upset as far as the stuff that got out to the public before they were able to secure a venue and to get things set. So there were people kind of renegading and doing their own stuff, but unfortunately for us, as they've got those tweets that are out there 20,000 times, they've got the flyers out there, and nobody can cause better press for themselves other than with the media. It was all over the media. We've had tons of phone calls, we have tons of inquiries. We do know what's coming, we're working with them. As of currently, there's not anything specifically planned for their event for our city. They were in talks with a couple of our local businesses in the downtown area. The last we heard, and they're supposed to meet with us again on this Friday to let us know they had a couple of possibilities, but honestly, I don't think those venues are going to work out for them. So we are planning as if all of these people are coming to our city. They are looking at doing some venues in Jacksonville as well. They're looking at a couple of city parks. They're looking at a couple of other options for them in Jacksonville. With that being said, we all know all the publicity is already out there. The flyers are out there. The social media is out there. All the news reports is constantly on the news basically every day. That's really just promoting it. But as of current time, we don't have anything planned specifically for our event in our city. We don't have anything that's permitted in our city for that event. They've looked at some options, doing stuff on the beach and things of that nature. We met with them. We went over our rules and guidelines for special events as well as the actual special event permitting, and they know that that's not going to work for them. Do I think maybe they're going to try to bring the event at a different time? That might be a possibility. I do think that they'll be looking at those options. So really, we're just waiting to hear from them on Friday. However, on the law enforcement side, we'll be working a full command post, all hands on deck. We've got other agencies already assisting us. We already have a law enforcement planning group going on that we have had going on. We've already had a couple of meetings. So we're going to be prepared. We've already worked with emergency management, sheriff's office, all other surrounding agencies, including the other two beach communities, St. Johns County, and a couple of other communities as well. So law enforcement side, we're going to be prepared. We'll be totally prepared. And as far as getting with special events with Parks and Rec under Jason's umbrella, we brought Kathy Butler involved, and she met with them as well. What they envisioned for our boardwalk area and some of our downtown venues, we actually drove them down there that day we talked to them. It was not what they envisioned. So that's where we stand.
Is their focus Jack's Beach, or they just said Jacksonville and the beaches of Jacksonville?
Originally, it was going to be Jacksonville, and then flyers got out for Jack's Beach. There's been flyers out for Jacksonville and Jacksonville Beach. And the problem is they've had a couple of DJs that took the original flyer and added their stuff to it, and they sent it out. The crew that works some of the promotions and stuff like that, they normally target adult strip clubs and some venues, some dance clubs, places like that. We don't have any of those places. So they have been in talks with other places in Jacksonville as well. So their goal, the last we talked, they were thinking, okay, they may do some events in Jacksonville, maybe do a beach day out here on that Saturday or that Sunday, depending on if they could get some park they were looking at doing to do some music in the park on the Sunday.
Anyone have any questions? Yes, sir.
They're unorganized. I will say this. In all my years' experience, they're unorganized. That doesn't mean that it's, to us, that's worse because we don't know what's coming. We don't know what, as far as our VRBOs, we made contacts to all of them. We don't know who's renting the houses, who's renting the larger venues. Well, I shouldn't say venue, but a lot of the rooms and block rooms and stuff like that with our hospitality people on our CRA. So they're all aware of it. Mr. Graham, we were actually at the same meeting we did over at Surfer, so they all knew just as much, if not more than what we did. So we are planning for it to be a full event. I will tell you, we will be running the command post that Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It's mandatory. It's basically a 4th of July for all of us. So we are prepared for it, and we will be prepared for it.
Commander Evans, one of the biggest issues that I've seen having experienced Freaknik in Atlanta over the years was just keeping traffic moving. Last weekend, I was down on Saturday to try to go to the art festival. Needless to say, it was packed.
And the weekend before that, this warm weather, my wife and I were, people are tired of being in their houses, the beaches are packed.
Understood.
Yeah.
But the concern that I saw, the thing that really became an issue is that no matter which parking lot you pulled into or end zone that you pulled into, there were lines of cars waiting usually for one spot maybe to open up. And if there was a way that once those spots are filled, that we close those off and keep traffic moving rather than trying to, because it started blocking.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great idea. I have no idea how we would, you're talking 32 end zones. You're talking.
I understand.
Even on the parking lots, that was easy to do prior to we went to the kiosks because they were manned. Now there's nobody manning them. And you put an officer there, that means they have to go around and inventory every single parking spot. And those people go out, they filter out probably every 15, 20 minutes. There's cars coming in and out. You're talking a tasked officer at every paid lot we have. You're talking that'd be a lot of money to bring an officer in overtime, or second, take a man out the streets, put him in a parking lot to do it.
Well,
Sometimes it helps out, bringing people in, they can't find a spot. Sometimes they'll filter out and move along.
And I wasn't specifically thinking of an officer. I was thinking more of, we've got paid parking services that are supposed to be working for the city. What's their role in all of this, and how can they help if the parking lot's full, if we put up cones so that someone can't enter it and traffic keeps moving rather than blocking the traffic on the street, which is what was happening.
You're talking specifically for the paid parking lots then?
Yes.
Okay, the paid parking lots, once we went to the kiosk system a couple of years ago, that took the element of the actual worker that was inside the parking lot out. So now it's all done with the kiosk. You enter and put your tag, and if you're a citizen beach resident, then you don't have to pay, and that type of thing. So that with those, we don't have. That's all done with that's all done contractually. And with the new kiosk, what that did was that took away the human element. And to be honest, and that's not really under my realm. It used to be under paid parking. But I think once we took the human element out, actually the numbers went like the money was here, we had a human element, and now we have a kiosk and an honor system, and it's.
So in our current contract for our provider, that's delegated to them. So I'm not sure we could go in and mandate that it's manned right now without having to do an amendment to our contract.
It's just an observation of what I saw when I was down there, because I tried going into one of the parking lots, the Cape lot, and it was a zoo trying to, once I realized there was no parking spots, I couldn't get back out again because all the cars were waiting for one person to pull out. I was just trying to figure out a way to avoid a real congestion problem that I saw in each of the lots as well as most of the units.
I mean, we see that issue as well, but as far as overcoming that and I couldn't even begin to tell you what we would do unless we put multiple people in all the lots. We don't have that luxury, unfortunately.
I actually liked it better when we had people in the lots. I mean, if nothing else, the appearance of being more safe,
Yeah.
because you had two people that are always there,
Yeah.
regardless of how much money we collect. Any other questions? Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Okay, one more thing before we get to items of discussion. I was asked by Heather, staff, and Jim if we would consider moving our meetings from 5 o'clock on Mondays. I've asked each one of you guys if we could move it to 3 o'clock on Friday, and it seems like that works for everybody.
On Friday?
I'm sorry, Monday. I apologize, on Monday. I'm already backtracking myself. Thank you, Mondays. And so I just wanted to, now that we're on the record, bring it up that. So I guess the question is, are we gonna do it this coming Monday, or are we gonna push off until the next Monday?
I'm available to do it at any point.
Can you guys all do it 3 o'clock this Monday? I mean, this, whenever our next meeting is? So that's a week from this Monday.
We have a meeting on the 26th, so that would be at 3 p.m.
Does that work for everybody? Does that work for you? All right, so then,
When are we talking about?
26.
Our next meeting, 26.
26. All right, so from this point on, we're gonna be meeting on Mondays at 3. Does that work for you guys as well?
We'll make it work.
I thought you guys would be more happy.
Yeah, we'll make it work. It doesn't matter when you have them, we'll make it work.
Trevor, does that work for you guys as well? Yes. Okay. All right, that all being said, Mr. Gilmore.
Mr. Chairman, would you like to introduce Ms. Mopps to everyone?
Oh, that's right. We have a new, you're our savior, or you're our boss, you're our worker bee.
No pressure, right?
Would you like to say a couple of words, young lady?
Sure. First, thank you for the opportunity. I'm excited to be here. I come from St. Mary's, Georgia, where I was doing Main Street and economic development there. I was there just shy of 3 years. And when I saw this opportunity, it seemed like it would be a really good fit. And I guess everyone here seemed to agree. So I'm excited to be here. This is day 3. And at this point, it's just been a lot of reading, observing, and kind of, sometimes it's like drinking from a fire hose, but it's okay. So it's been a really good week so far, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, a lot of this stuff is all new for us. Things have changed so much in the last 12 months.
Yeah.
So it's all coming fast and furious as well. So welcome
Yeah.
aboard. And
Thank you.
for coming. Mr. Gilmore.
I'm going to try to talk a little, hope that each of you talk a lot. That will frame the conversation today about the objectives. But before we get into that, I'd like to give a prelude of what's going to happen at the meeting on the 26th. It's going to be a very full agenda. One of the key items is that Cody from Dix Heights is going to be here under Kale's leadership over there to give a complete presentation on all the Jacksonville Beach design plans, where we are in terms of bike racks, how to develop, site furnishing, everything in association with that, with background. That's going to be in an official meeting, but to some degree it's going to be a workshop as well. At the same time, Trevor and Jason are going to be here to present for action some of the items that are in the plan that's been discussed with you before for authorization from you then to go to City Council for funding because they cost over $25,000. At the same time, you'll be discussing looking at things that don't cost over $25,000. They're in the process of being ordered right now for the park over here, as well as an update on the park. So that's some of the major items that we'll be talking about at the next meeting. Third part that I hope we're going to be talking about at the next meeting is some of the results of this meeting today. And that's where I'll go into next. And Gary asked me about this. Some of you may have received a notice or request about a potential meeting with the City Council towards sometime in May. As we move through this process and we talk about ideas and ways and means to amend the plan, the recommendation has been that we do meet with the City Council to have that discussion so we can come to a conclusion and move to amending the plan together so that any of these items can be included in the wonderful budget that Ashley's potentially preparing right now. So that's a little bit about, yes.
I haven't seen the email, so who has requested said meeting and why was it suggested we change the plan we currently have?
No, not
I
talking about
understand
changing the
the
plan. Just saying if there were any amendments to the plan
That we
might
would
be
ask
added.
them to amend.
Because they have to amend it. Yeah, that's what that's about.
It was a Zoom meeting.
I didn't see it, so.
Yeah, it was something that I received from Chris Wright is where I received the.
Chris is
I probably
Mike's.
denied it, not realizing what it was.
Chris
so.
is Mike's.
I mean, I get them so I might just ask, I'll reach out.
We'll reach
Can you
out.
reach out to Chris?
Well, yeah, we'll figure out how soon that's gonna be.
I might be able to tell you here in a second as to what the date was, because I think I put it on my calendar. It's May,
26.
yes, May 26th, 5:30 to 7 is what I had as a Zoom meeting.
That what?
5:30 to 7.
I do have it on here, I just haven't seen it yet. Okay, thank you. I will accept it right now.
Good. So, again, I'm coming back to the end. It's a brainstorm about potential projects to be added to the plans via an amendment. And I want to talk a minute about the amendment process. The plan will be amended to add those items that you think you would want to recommend to the city council and to the community that are not in the plan right now. We've had a lot of discussions about that over the last few months. It's been led a lot by Gary and by Francis and Jeffrey, or each of you, the things that could be included, because in order to expend money on those items, as we know, they have to be identified, they have to be written up, we have to have a budget, we have to be in there, and we have to submit it to the city council for approval. Now, the amendment process is really pretty basic in this case. All we have to do is to, if you will, one of the last major amendments was the South Beach Community Development Plan in 2011. This will all be written up with budget items and how we do it, and then it will be submitted to the Jacksonville Beach City Council for action and recommendation, and it will become part of the plan. Some have asked, well, what about the city of Jacksonville, the other taxing authority that gives us a lot of their money? The statute only says that they have to be notified. They don't have any approval, they just have to be notified and have to give it to them. That's all we have to do on that. And I confirmed that by checking with the Cliff Shepherd Law Firm, who's represented us before. He said, and actually Jacob, who works with him, who we've had conversations with, said, unless there's something in an interlocal agreement with COJ, nothing is required except to tell them that you're going to do it. And I asked Ashley and the staff to go back and reconfirm if there were any agreements with the city of Jackson on that subject, and there are not. So we can simply, as we work to make recommendations, simply notify them that this is what we're going to do. So that's the amendment process. We will identify those items that are not in the current plans, that we want to be in the current plans, and we will write them up, and you will then be able to consider recommending an amendments to the Jackson Beach City Council to include it in there. And so the conversation today is what is in that plans that are not in there. And I thought we might begin in talking about the South Beach area as a major area to start with. And again, I'm going to start now, and then I'm going to be quiet. You've each received the last amendment to the plan. And in conversations with Dennis and confirmation, everything within this plan has been done or is in process to be done. That's an extremely important point. And Dennis will get to us, not today, but at some point, another update on that prior to our next meeting on where we are on all those things. And with that in context, there's been lots of items, things discussed that we might want to see in the South Beach area, so let's talk about them. And what's going to happen here is that our wonderful director of planning, who has many skill sets, is going to put everything that we talk about up on a whiteboard there. So we can take that and look at it, and the staff, that's why Public Works is here, Parks and Rec's here, the police department's here, finance is here, and our director of planning, so we can take a look at all that and formulate it and get this back to you in a quick time frame of what it would take to do that, to see if it's indeed worthy of consideration. So this is a brainstorming session to talk about all the things that you've mentioned in the last few days. So let's get it up on the board and talk. And we'll do the same thing with downtown. And we'll take it, analyze it, get it back to you in a very, very short time frame for consideration for final action. With that, Mr. Chairman.
Francis?
Two questions. One, I'm assuming that means we're gonna have to have a workshop beforehand because our next meeting is already pretty much occupied. We're gonna need some more time.
Sure, absolutely.
And then two, have we ever, because one of the things we had a discussion about down south, and it's, has anyone found out if we are able to, remember we were talking about doing advertising, trying to find people to fill those buildings, the retail area over there, because we were losing, we had lots of empty spaces.
I think we need to write that up on the
I
board.
remember that was one of the
Yeah.
things, we had to find out if we could even allow, we were even allowed to do that.
Put it up on the board. That's
Okay.
something that we need to analyze to write on the board. How do we assist retail establishments that are
If you were talking about our,
vacant spaces in the South Beach area? That's something that's been said, and we need to put it on the board.
because we were talking about that incentive
That's right.
platform, and we could figure it out.
That's another thing, incentive platform for South Beach businesses. That's the question that should go up on the board for analysis.
Gary?
Just as we kick off South Beach, I want to make sure I'm on the same page with everybody. There's about, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's about $19 million worth of capital improvements projects in the South Beach area identified right now. 21 million. Yeah, 19 million was the number that I originally got from Public Works, and then I think Ashley had some further conversations and work with them, and we're up to roughly $21 million worth of items that are still to be done within South Beach, which would then complete the report that was published back in March of 2011. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
Okay. So we're kicking it off from that point. There is another study being done right now in the way of stormwater management in the South Beach district, which may identify additional projects and so forth.
If I may,
That's correct.
it may, what it's primarily doing is focusing on identifying alternatives to move forward on design and construction with the phases 5 and 6 that are in this.
That are identified.
But that doesn't mean it won't identify some other needs beyond 5 and 6 that we will want to incorporate into an update.
So that's still, that may be something that we add to this list somewhere down the road
Yes,
here.
I'm looking at, right now we're looking at around November-ish for them to be completed with that preliminary study and design on that, to have some identified alternatives for projects.
So the question is, will that study identify additional projects? That's the phrasing that we're going to identify, but we won't know until that goes.
And the objective here is to identify projects that are needed to be put in the budget for this year.
For the plan to be amended to see if there are budget items to be included. That's right.
So these items would have to be something considered next year.
Well, we don't want to consider, I mean, any year coming up, I mean, we just want spitballing ideas
That's
of
right.
where to go. We'll have to work with Ashley and Public Works and everybody else to try to figure out where and how we're going to get these projects done.
Dennis is right.
We can't completely pack 22 and say we're going to do all this wonderful stuff. We may not have the bandwidth to do everything. So what we're trying to look for is what ideas, what listings can we have so that we can start to take that list and formulate the plan that says, okay, these are the items we know we can do. These are the items that Jason and Trevor can take on and they can just begin getting completed. These are the items that take planning. These are the items that we have to have, budgetary concerns that we can't necessarily maybe pull on immediately to do. I think that's the general
No,
idea.
I appreciate what you're saying. I just wanted to make sure I was clear on how we're going to proceed and the expectations a little bit. I wanted to clarify that for myself.
Because that's a good point, because some things that we may identify that can be done might have to take place over multi-years. And the objective from, or the directive from the redevelopment agency, it says we have these funds, so let's see if there are indeed needs that we have in the South Beach for which we can develop projects, put them in the plan, and know they're going.
So then bullet point 2, just for clarification, is how do we deal with a future projects that are a result of the study that we've requested? Is that what the official bullet point 2 is? You said there was a certain way you wanted to question.
I don't.
I would think we just want to list it as stormwater master plan action items is probably the best way to do it, because that's a plan that it's not related to what you guys are doing. It's a plan that's related to the entire city, and the entire stormwater master plan. Once we have that in hand, we'll be able to look back to say, what can we fit into the CRA, where in the CRA it fits, or does it at all, or does it fit with a split because of it being a joint benefit to not just the CRA, but to the city as well.
Okay.
When you go back to the March report, the 2011 report, it was broken down into roadways, stormwater, water, so on and so forth. Do we need another look at that? Does somebody need, from an engineering standpoint, need to take a look at that? I mean, for us to sit up here and say we need, all these new infrastructure improvements is kind of hard to say unless we had some kind of backup for that to help us understand. But I don't see us going in that direction. Stormwater is the only thing we've talked about so far.
And I think that's based on the function that okay, so previous history, Bill Mann kind of provided us the guidance that the CRA can't necessarily cover it unless the CRA originally covered it. So while we might identify a water main that needs to be replaced, if the CRA didn't originally pay for it, we cannot include that as part of the CRA funding. So I think that's where it kind of gets a little different, because I think Steve Lindor, prior to Bill, had a little different viewpoint on what may or may not be included in the CRA plans as they function through the process. So we're all learning this as well, and I think every time we have a meeting, we kind of come up with a little different idea. Yes, this can be included, and no, this can't. Bill Mann was not a fan of including lift stations because his idea was, well, the CRA didn't build them, but the development in the CRA is what caused it to be built. Whether it was built by a third party and then given to the city or however, it was still driven by the CRA and the development process.
And
So
I have a real concern along those lines because we keep talking about we can't do this in the South Beach area because it wasn't something that the CRA did originally. What about all the work in the downtown area that's being done right now, has been done, that was not originally done by the CRA, but yet we're going in, we're replacing streets, we're replacing piping, we're doing all of that. If it can be done in the downtown area, we should be able to do it in the South Beach area also.
But Gary, and this is the point of what you just talked about. Those items that were identified in the downtown plan were items that were considered to be life condition that need to be corrected. So that didn't have the criteria of CRA.
You're talking about the downtown.
I'm not talking about the downtown,
The blighted area was down in the South Beach area too.
and that's correct. That's why all that stuff has already been done.
There's an inconsistency that I've seen here it's got me confused more than anything. And I'd like to, if we're gonna put some rules out there, let's establish them and make sure that they work for both of the districts and so forth. Just
Well,
need some
we
help.
share that at Public Works, and I don't know what document or documents, I was never able to get that information from Bill. If somebody could do that and find out what exactly the documented rules are for how the money can be used, that would help all of us on some of these utility infrastructure projects that right now, it was done one way before, it was done a different way with Bill, and I don't know how it's going to be done moving forward. But there's one way that it can be done right, and I'm not sure what that is.
yeah, that's some of the concerns that we have. Exactly what you're saying, Gary, is exactly what we're dealing with. Is sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes the answer is no, sometimes the answer is maybe, and I think you're as frustrated as we are because we don't know what we can and can't do within these limitations.
It's all good until you get caught.
Actually,
She just gave her a
I
hard
don't
time.
answer one for people, but if we could find that answer.
So, if I can offer just a little bit of clarifying, I don't think I'm gonna answer the question, but, the methodology or the philosophy that is my understanding is if the condition existed when the CRA was formed and declared as blighted, then the city may go in and do it. But as a result of redevelopment, if a developer went into a neighborhood and put in the streets, the stormwater systems, or contributed to the lift station, well, that's a product of redevelopment. So the agency can't go in and maintain that because then now it's a city asset. And so that's how kind of the dividing line that I'm familiar with has been drawn. If the infrastructure is a direct result of the redevelopment, then it's a city asset, and so redevelopment can't maintain it. But if redevelopment went in and put that street in and put that stormwater in, then it may now maintain it.
That's very well said.
Okay, well, two things. First of all, on that comment, it sounds like you're saying the same thing. We can do one and the other, but they're the same thing. We did a redevelopment of this subdivision through a developer, or we did a redevelopment of a street outside a subdivision. Didn't we do both of those? One through a developer and one through ourselves?
So it's as a result, the agency did like the major road work, but then the developer brought up the parcels, went into the neighborhood and kind of finished out the build out. Well, that was the developer's contribution to the city. So the CRA kind of set the stage because we went in first and we kind of prepared the land, increased the value and kind of opportunity in the area. And then private development then came and took it over and they
And
contributed.
that takes it out of our jurisdiction.
Exactly.
Okay, the second question I had, take your lift station example. And you've got a lift station that's inadequate right now, and partly because of all the redevelopment that's been incurred. And so you have to replace it with a brand new lift station. Now, isn't that something the CRA can do, because it's not repairing something that existed before, it's replacing it with a brand new,
Who put in the lift station?
I don't know.
Well, and what usually happens is the lift station's installed as part of that development by the developer. But I agree with you, because when you look through this plan, you find several lift stations that are exactly called out by name. So does that mean only the ones called out by name are included in the plan? Because I mean, we're rebuilding some of these right now using city-funded dollars as opposed to CRA dollars, and this is back to that conundrum that we've been faced with before, because under the previous director, because it was not strictly built by the CRA, it wasn't covered, but these are even items that are explicitly called out by number in the plan. So if they're called out by the plan, are they covered or are they not covered?
Well, my view is potentially, absent a legal opinion, and I'm not going to claim to be a lawyer, but I take a very, I hate to use this word, but liberal construction of the statute, and I'd say it's there, it's in the redevelopment district, and it's failing, and it potentially could be considered.
Actually, a question for you. If some of these developers, especially on the south end, we gave them incentive dollars, does that not automatically make it our project? I mean, we had the one developer down there, we gave him $1 million, and, you know, I'm sure that $1 million went into the infrastructure, went to everything else. And actually, I think one of them, it actually was probably spelled out for the infrastructure. So does that not mean that we own it now because we funded it?
So I would want a legal opinion on that. The one subdivision that the city, the CRA assembled the parcels and then conveyed it to a developer who then put in an entire neighborhood. And the infrastructure that they put in, the street, the bridge, the walkways, that was all conveyed to the city for maintenance. So I would want to consult with our attorney about if we could use CRA dollars to maintain those public streets because they were conveyed to the city, not to the CRA for ongoing maintenance.
Because I think we're talking about the same specific developer, because he came back to the city saying that there's all kind of drainage issues here and other things going on, and we ended up giving him $1 million on top of everything else to fix the infrastructure problems. So to me, that means we have either ownership or partial ownership to all that stuff.
So I think probably we would need to get a legal opinion on that because when the development was completed, they conveyed and the city accepted for public infrastructure all the streets and stormwater system in that neighborhood.
Well, for the purpose of this meeting here, let's go back to what's interesting over here. Some of these things are actually specifically spelled out in our plan. I think we own those things.
I agree. I completely agree.
I mean, if we need to take some kind of a vote saying that we as a board think that's the case, I mean, we can do that. Actually, I guess we'll, by a show of hands, who agrees with that logic? It's
in the
unanimous.
plan.
So, I mean,
I can't vote, so that's not a voting session.
so unless you hear something different, if it's spelled out specifically in that plan, then as far as I'm concerned, you can use CRA funds.
We'll try to work internally to figure that piece of it out, because that was, like you said, that's what I saw today when I was reviewing everything in there, is I'm seeing that we've got projects that are incorporating rebuilding some of these lift stations right now, but they are also listed in our normal CIP budget. So that creates the other conundrum, which is because they've been called out in our regular CIP budget, we have to let them drop off there for, what is it, 2 years?
3 years.
3 years before we can re-bring them back into the CRA because they've already been called out under the city
Now,
budget.
there is truth to that, that is.
So
But it
we
could
might
be-
have some issues there that we have to deal with, and I don't know how many, I just happened to see the lift stations, and that was one of the pieces that Cale and I were talking about that was one of those sticking pieces with Bill was lift stations weren't covered, and because we argued saying, well, the lift station behind Target would never been built had Target and that whole facility not come in there. There was no need for it. And so what drove that? Did the development drive it? Did the CRA, I mean, the CRA
Well, I can
redevelopment
answer that,
drove it.
because I was here when the CRA drove it, because
Yeah.
that was all land that had to be condemned and then sold to the developer.
Yeah, so, but at the end of the day, the city had to pay to rebuild that lift station, even though it was included in the plan, because we had some different guidance. So that's why I say we gotta kinda get our guidance squared out so we know what we're doing too.
Well, I guess if you need specific guidance from us, and I guess as you deal with staff, you need specific guidance from this board, you just got that. If
Okay.
you need other legal opinions or other things, you gotta deal with Ashley and everybody upstairs, Francis.
I was gonna mimic on that, because that's pretty much what I was saying, but I would say that, I know there's those rules where you can't move it from one bucket to another bucket without some kind of legal guidance. I'm assuming that also means monetarily balancing and readjusting those. There's gonna be some kind of thing with that, but I would say the same thing as far as we're concerned. If it's in a document that we are bound to kind of follow, you would think that we would therefore pay for it.
Jim?
I was gonna ask this, in that regard, are there other items, other things in the South Beach, other lift stations, other things, other road resurfacing, other stuff that is not in that plan that potentially could be considered to be put in a plan amendment for South Beach?
I don't even know that I can answer it because I'm not that familiar with
Okay.
everything that's in the plan. I mean, I know, we were going to,
And this
we
is-
were gonna resurface one
that's-
particular roadway, that I know, we were going to do, which is right there in front of
Right.
Target and all that whole area going around, and it didn't get done last year, but it's probably going to be coming up in this year's processes, but.
That one's already been cleared.
I was just thinking if there are
Yeah.
other things.
Other roads.
Other
he said
things
we
that are
couldn't,
not
so-
in this, like other roads, lift stations, anything else that might,
This
could
study
be,
had a
that's what
lot,
I'm saying.
this study had a lot of roadway evaluations done at that time. Obviously 10 years old, but it was done at that time, and it talked about resurfacing certain roads.
Yeah, and
which
reconstructing
should have
as
been
well.
done under the part of the CRA, but now it's falling under the city to resurface those roads because you've got another program that's moving forward, is what I'm seeing.
No, well, we were told we could not use CRA dollars just to mill and resurface.
I
those roads.
understand,
Even
but it-
though I think some of them were originally in this plan. We were told we could do Marsh Landing Parkway, but the others
Riptide is an example. I mean, the Riptide was just recently resurfaced
with city dollars.
with city dollars. Should that have been CRA dollars?
I think Riptide was before the CRA was formed.
No, it was not.
It's one of the ones that was in it.
No, Riptide was the first development that, that land was condemned and sold to the Riptide development.
So does that mean that our bullet number three is talking about, if we can, like what we can add to it and then move it to a second board, what we can move to our budget from their budget, or is it what can we do with the budget and then add to it? Like, how would you do that? Budget and then, like a bullet point. Well, because you've got two big points, right? They're both combined. So do we say, the one thing we want to discuss is what can we move, if anything, from the financial statements and from the city budget to our budget and responsibilities, and then a subcategory of that being what else do we add? Or is it what can we add to this, and then the subcategory being can we do it at all because of finance and whatnot? I feel like it's review this, see what else we can add to it to take away from the city and put them under our umbrella, and then subcategory, can we even do that, like legally?
Yes.
Would you agree with that? Does that make sense? category and a subcategory.
Doesn't make sense. Makes a lot of sense.
So then whose job is it going to be to do all that?
I mean, I need to restate that.
Yeah, you know, what it comes down to is we just need to have the guidance that says, yes, this is covered, and yes, it can be covered under CRA dollars.
And
If
then
it is,
come up with a
we'll
list.
run with it.
And
I
now
mean,
come up with a list and run it.
Okay, so then on that note, do you mind if I keep talking?
Sure, sure,
Okay,
sure.
Sorry, on that note, since we don't have a city attorney, because it sounds like an attorney question, and we had professional services in our budget that we got pushed through. Do we need to have a vote that we use some of that money to get that answer?
I'm not opposed to that, but I would imagine we have somebody within the building, don't we have somebody just that's doing contract work for us, legal contract work for us? Or we can just ask Shepherd.
So I think for the CRA questions, we would go back to Cliff Shepherd.
Yeah.
And we can just ask Shepherd right now.
Because you
I
have
can
him on
formulate
And
a
we have
query.
him under contract.
I can formulate a query to him tomorrow.
Okay.
yeah, because I think some of the answers we need to know, I mean, this plan identifies dust control roads, saying they should be rebuilt with proper base and whatever, and same thing with going with mill and overlay. Now, if we're just, you know, if we're just doing a micro surfacing, which is not a full-on mill overlay, then I would agree, that should be maintenance. But in my opinion, mill and overlay is not a maintenance, that is a partial reconstruction, as well as a full reconstruction. We need to know if those fit into the CRA puzzle. Yes, they fit, and then as they fit, then we can make a determination that says, okay, these roadways do fit, and we can run those subsequent in parallel to our regular paving program, so that when our paver comes in and does wherever they're working at in the city, they would then take a chunk of the CRA area and do it as well.
As long as we financially and legally can move the buckets.
Exactly.
I agree with that.
I mean, I'm all over getting more paving done. I just gotta have more dollars to do it. So it makes sense if this will fit in that process. This is a good answer and a slam dunk for the
I
city.
think the city council would appreciate us taking it off their budget.
So, what happens tomorrow? Do we just look at currently things that are your to-do list that is funded by city dollars and see which of those things can go to the CRA and then get a legal opinion on if it can or cannot go to CRA?
I think we need the legal opinion on whether milling and overlaying, partial reconstruction of roadways and or full reconstruction of roadways can be considered, if they're located in the CRA, can they be funded with CRA dollars?
As well as lifts, as well as.
But that all depends on how the original CRA is written up. I mean, you may be able to do it downtown, you can't do it down the south end.
That's what we would like, we're, in addition to the stormwater work, we're also doing, we're doing a kind of a smaller stormwater project than the whole city, which is the central basin and the south basin that we're starting to move forward on. We're also getting started on, soon here, on a citywide stormwater master plan update. That's going to involve how do we address potential sea level rise, all things like that. We are currently doing a sanitary sewer master plan update, and soon we're going to be starting and doing a water system hydraulic modeling master plan update. So all of those will result in recommended projects and prioritizing projects. Some of those projects may be things on our current CIP, some of them may not be. And if we know the answer and we have a litmus test at that time, we can look at all of those projects and come up with some that seem to fit, the mold for CRA funded or partially CRA funded projects, and move that into an updated, an amended plan. We just need to know what, we all need to know what can move forward and what can't.
My concern is I want to make sure that there is a game plan for tomorrow. So we're not back here 2 weeks saying, well, I thought he was going to do it, I thought he was going to do it.
And I think those answers are gonna be our roadmap to what we can do. The same thing would go is, sewer line maining, or sewer main lining. Is that, that is a cured in place pipe lining that basically gets you another 50 years out of a sewer line. As we start looking through, maybe the South Beach area, there's places that lining needs to be done. Can that be covered under CRA as part of the process? Because it's another, again,
Yes, but then I'm not.
So are you taking?
I'm going to formulate a query to Shepard, to Jacob on that, but I'm going to do that in absolute direct strategic management with Mike.
Yeah, because I think we need some,
Ashley, so that we know exactly what the wording is going to be before we send it off.
right, we just want to make sure, because those questions, in my opinion, if those questions are yes, that gives us the roadmap to say, okay, now here's what we got, here's what we need to do, here's, let's just say the answer is yes, all this paving could be covered. Well, my first idea would be take the entire district and divide it up into a 4-year split and say, we're gonna do 25% of it every single year, and over the next 4 years, we're gonna completely repave everything in that whole area, if it's covered and you have the dollars to be able to do it.
So I think we need to answer that question before we start diving into any wish lists on the south end. Because these are things that we all know that need to happen.
On
Well-
infrastructure.
Yeah. Well, at least we know it's a question that we're going to move forward with asking, but it can still be a bullet point, and now we can continue taking it off from there to anything. I mean, what we're looking for is direction from you guys as to what projects can we do, especially ones that we already know are in this plan that are, they might be a wish list, it might be the pocket park, it might be this, it might be that. If those items can be identified, that kind of, especially if it already fits within the plan, that's a green light to do those projects immediately. This is kind of more of a longer term over the next few years, because we're not going to be able to do it all, but we got to have the answer is yes, this is included, or no, it can't be included, so that we know what our wish list is. I mean, it's hard for us to bring a wish list to you. I mean, you guys have mentioned before in your meetings, you want to completely rebuild before you give it to the city. Well, if none of that is ever covered, it doesn't matter whether you want to rebuild it or not. It's never going to get rebuilt and handed to the city because you don't have the ability to be able to do it.
Jim? Do you have something you're saying?
I was going to say, but I'm listening to you, Dennis, and it seems that if, say, an answer is yes on what funds can be spent on and it's clarified, I'm hearing you say, if, for example, if it's paving, repaving, required to be paved in the southeast redevelopment area, then you'd have a whole list of timing frame to get that done in there. Is that correct? That was the clarification. Thanks.
You'd have a wish list. You would have a wish list, as long as some other people might have wish lists at that point.
Well, I created one to a certain extent.
Don't even pull that thing out.
Why is that?
Let's finish what's in the plan first.
Well, we're talking about wish lists. This is, so to speak, a wish list, which is what you asked me to create.
That's right.
And, it's a starting point. It may not have everything on it that others at the table want to add to it. And we had talked about sitting down, and obviously now we're finally doing it. Having this conversation about what needs to be put into the South Beach plan.
That's true. You're right there.
So are we at that stage now, like this, we basically talked about this point. So we're at the stage of what else because right now, are we not right now saying the things that we want to go to city council with? Or is this just things we need to get done so we can come up with stuff we want to go to city council with?
It's neither one and the same thing.
Because this will all need some kind of answer and assistance beforehand. So the things we want to say, for instance, I want to propose that we also address security at the park.
Put it on the list.
Then that would not be something we need from you guys. That would be a discussion we would have here today. We would make our official feelings on all those individual things now,
Yes.
so that we know what we're going to move forward with now versus later. Is that what we're doing? Like,
That's what I'm
I just kind of get
It's a brainstorming session, yes.
how do you want to go about it?
That works for me.
So then can I propose that we at least systematically work through the, like go either north to south or east to west or some kind of general area type, like focus in one area each as we do our whistler, so we're not like going here, 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 or is that just too much to ask?
One thing that you brought up before, and we didn't have our officers here, but we were talking about putting some sort of camera hookup on top of the lights. Did we reach out to
Yes.
Did we reach out to the police to make sure that
Yeah.
what we're planning is going to sync or fit into the camera systems that they have?
Sorry, go ahead.
We did not, Mr. Chairman. What we did do was reach out to the company that will install them to make sure that they can fit. We need to make the next leap to talk with the police department. But all the lights that we will be replacing will have an accommodation to take a camera on.
That's awesome. And I have had,
If we're looking to put lights in the South End Park, and we want to put it so you can actually attach a camera to the top of the lights, who within your department should we be talking to make sure what we're putting in would work with your camera system? So
That will go with our IT professional, Ricardo, and he's the one that handles all of the cameras down here, and he would let you know if it's feasible to connect that one with this, and then also run the feed to the police department.
So let's make sure before we start purchasing any of these things that,
Yes, no, we will, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
We work with Ricardo. We do have a system at the skate park now that talks to the police department and stuff, and we will coordinate that.
well, that's fantastic. I didn't know.
Does that need to be put on the list, just so we don't forget about it?
park security. I'd like to add to that, just to note, so I did have a very long conversation with Chief Smith about it, a really long conversation. And he says he would love to have it and all, but he's not quite ready for it, but he's happy that we're putting the infrastructure in, and that coordinating with them does make sense, because he would like to consider it in the next couple of years, but he can't focus on it right this minute. I do think it's important that we put that on the list, because not only is it lighting, it's also a fiber optic type cable camera system.
That's good stuff.
But if we're gonna move ahead with the park improvements, we need, like fiber optic, that has to be part of the improvement. So that's all gotta be coordinated ahead of time, not
Correct.
2 years from now.
Right, that's why he said he's happy that we're considering doing that, but he wasn't ready to implement or manage or anything quite yet.
But
It's a
we
whole
could do
nother-
all the infrastructure.
You could do the cable and get that in ahead of time.
So I do know that they're interested in it.
There were some other enhancements, police type enhancements that I had brought up in a conversation with the chief also, what he was gonna think about it. And I haven't gotten any feedback yet, so we may need to go circle back with him and have a conversation to talk about what other kind of enhancements are appropriate for down in the South Beach area that the police would like to see.
Right. So curious question for how this is working, I'm sorry, one more time,
No.
I'm interrupting. When we have the Bullet Point Park security up there, and we're talking about making some formal agreement for the city council to approve on, are we going to be specifying, is this gonna be like a broad stroke approval, or is it going to be like, we want to specifically, like how they get here, or say we specifically want, like, what is the detail we're getting into?
That's a
Since
very
we
good
have
question.
we have less than 3 weeks to do so.
That's a very good question. And here is my thoughts on that, subject to discussion with the administration. We've been very clear on that. But one can put in a plan amendment, not so broad it's universal, but something short of complete in the weeds specificity, so that you've got a category there that will talk about what you are going to do that will allow you to budget for it. That makes sense.
Yes, it does. So you guys will listen to our comments. We don't have to vote on said stuff, but these are the comments we'd like to get added
To get it in the plan.
in general specifics, okay. So since we're on the park,
Generally specific, I like that.
yes. So in the park, since we're already on the park, is there any other stuff? Because my big thing for the park has been park security. I know that we've also talked about replacing said park structure. I'm assuming that's already, we can add it to our list, but like replacing the gym, that's completely like the.
That's already,
That's already done,
that's,
right?
that's in the plan.
So is there anything else in that park?
when you're talking about security, other than cameras, what else are you talking about? You talking about, I don't know how people feel about panic buttons. You talking about something along that line, or, I mean, what are you talking about for security?
Me personally, it was just lighting and camera. That's for me personally. Doesn't mean you guys can't add to it, but for me, that's what security for the next 5 years, 10 years, whatever. For this specific, I don't want to get, but that's why I was asking, how specific are we going to get? Are we going to say, in general, we would like to improve security, and there's your.
But we were
your
talking
information.
about lighting, cameras, and fiber optics, some of those generally specific categories. Even if we don't have everything specified, then we can tie something to you to know that we're going to do it.
Would it have like a dot after it?
Big citadel?
I'm not following you
mentioned this probably your very first year on the board. You wanted to talk about the community center and if it was needing expansion or if it was needing extra room for city employees to have space to work as well as rentable space. Is that something that anybody here wants to maybe consider as something we would add?
Actually, yeah.
The state statutes
Cannot do that.
prohibit TIF dollars to be used for administrative facilities.
Okay, so that acts as that.
Cannot do that.
Right, we've already talked about the,
State statute.
State statute
Yeah.
says you cannot build a municipal facility for any administrative
Like a
functions.
police,
Like a police
but wasn't the original community center done with CRA funds?
Community center is different. Community center is different. That's a community recreational center, so that's different. You can do that.
well, we,
Doesn't mean that somebody's office is not.
well,
You know,
you know what I mean, Gary? Like, you can say it, because I'm not gonna say it, if you don't.
go ahead.
So hypothetically, if we kick them all out and build a community center and then they come back in, I mean, just being honest. No? Okay, that's skirting the line too much. Okay, just curious.
Red Rose.
That facility is used as one of the emergency centers during hurricanes and things like that. My thought at the time was more along the lines of what else do we need in the facility to make sure that it's very operational during a severe condition within the city. Because all of the folks are going to move down there to that facility if we have a category 4 or 5 type hurricane, is what I'm understanding. So the question is, what more is needed in that facility to make it, functional during a situation like that? And is there some way that the CRA can participate in helping to provide the kind of facility that the city would need?
Like, does it have a backup generator?
It does have a generator. The question is whether or not it's sufficient to take care of all of the functions and needs within that building. I don't know what kind of capacity it has, but I understand police goes down there, public works would be located down there, maybe even some other outside agencies would come in and set up within the conference rooms and so forth. So the
Yeah.
question just becomes, is there something that we can do to make sure that we've got the best possible facility in a severe situation here in the city?
So the generator does, it's a hybrid, it's a mix between natural gas and normal gas, I guess. It's a 30-hour capacity. We do have, we did purchase an extra tank that would run for 2-3 more days. But that's about the extent of it, Mr. Paytard. You are correct, it is an EOC center for us during hurricane and other emergencies.
Did the CRA build that building?
I don't know that, Mr.
I don't think so.
Chairman.
They did?
Yes, the
Yeah,
CRA
when you read the report,
contributed to the community center's construction, and the footprint of the community center is that the parks offices are considered to be incidental to the full footprint of the building, and that's how the CRA could fund it.
So if we wanted to do anything or enhance that building, it's just all through regular maintenance because we own it because we built it.
Well, since we rent this space out, the common space we rent to the public, we use the revenues generated from that to maintain the building, and then the city, because the parks offices are there, the city maintains that part of it.
So we cannot use our funds to maintain that building and make changes as Gary is talking about, because it's, just like we were talking about the park, we couldn't do anything with the playground equipment because we didn't put it in and we didn't pay for it. This building, we put it in and we paid for it. Why can't we continue funding it?
Yeah, so in this particular case, if we were contemplating changes to the building to serve the administrative facilities, that's prohibited by the state statutes unless we get the taxing authorities to agree to the exception. But in terms of maintaining the interior of the building, we have the revenues generated from the rental facilities, and then we have the administrative offices, and because they're administrative offices, we can't seek TIF dollars to support the administrative spaces there. So in this particular case, the maintenance of the park center as it stands right now is really covered by the city.
But since it's our emergency preparedness center, I'm sure we could probably get Jacksonville to say that makes sense to us because that provides safety for our beaches.
We would have to ask that question.
Are we talking cleaning and stuff like that, or air conditioning unit goes out and you have to replace that?
So because the city is now accepted that, the air conditioning unit is covered in the city's CIP plan.
Does it have to be, I guess is our question.
Well, I think that goes back to the other question of like, do
Yeah.
we want to give that to the CRA? Would we have a legal opinion of could the CRA come in and take those responsibilities over? Because we have it in the city's CIP plan, we would have to make sure it sits out for 3 years before it could be added into the CRA's CIP plan.
It just seems to me all that around and round circle we did the playground equipment, it seems to me since we built this, we own this, we should be able to facilitate anything we wanted.
I think the hiccup that we have is, we're in the very unique situation of having a mature district, and still having the funding available to operate within it. So I think the original contemplation was the original buildings, not the long-term maintenance and rebuilding of them. So we can ask Cliff Shepherd to give us a guidance on that as well.
So should make that a point. So another point should be that
building maintenance.
it should be, I would call it community service. Yes.
Community center service.
Yeah, community services.
Yeah, community
Because
center,
we
not
actually,
parks.
yeah, I would say community services too. I'm trying to think what else we talked about. We talked about a sidewalk in on the west part, right across from the fire department. We talked about that.
On the west side.
On the west side of that, is that something we?
I guess I'm not allowed to go through my.
Go through your
Well, I'm
list.
just kind of going.
Go through your list.
So I'm just trying to
There's
do
no
it.
stopping you.
I don't understand, I'm not sure I understand. You want a list, but then you don't want it. Help me understand what you're.
Well, no, you brought that list up before, and you and Bill Mann went back and forth for about 20 minutes one meeting before I said, you guys need to sit down and decide what on this list makes sense and does not make sense, you can and cannot do, and then, but you still keep coming back with the same list.
But now we're saying that some of the things that Bill Mann said were not correct.
So
May not be correct.
which ones, let's just focus on the park. Which of the points on there are on the park that you have? Because the only other thing I can think of for the park that we haven't addressed is that reworking the parking lot from parking where we can accommodate a sidewalk. Remember, that was the only other thing I could think
There's a
of.
sidewalk that we should put in along the west side of the fire station, the
Across-
community center,
right.
from Osceola down to the skate park.
Right, so
along,
maybe-
right alongside of the
Yeah.
little water tanks there, because there's real no safe way for the kids to come in.
That's the only, out of all that, those are the only things I can remember talking about with those.
Mr. Chairman, since we're going along in this discussion, I'm maybe premature in Trevor's presentation to you in a couple of weeks, but the survey study that we did on the playground, has given us a lot of good information. So we are looking at some additional funding for that playground. One of the things that they talked about in the survey that came out was shading the whole structure. If we are going to go with wood, that would be a good idea, not only to keep people in the shade, but to preserve the structure for long term. The other thing that Trevor and I are working on, and we may not be able to bring it to you in 2 weeks, is got a lot of demand for pickleball. And they're asking for some pickleball courts. Trevor identified the patch of grass that sits to the east of the admin building is unused. We're going to get with Heather. We haven't had a chance to meet with her to see if they meet the setbacks. We are meeting a contractor out there to see, how many courts that could take.
Are you talking about east of the fire station?
Yes.
Like literally out on the corner there?
Yes, it's a sizable, it's right behind or to the north of the basketball court.
Yes, exactly what you're talking about, right in the corner.
It just seems a bit silent to me. I kind of like the green open space there, but I mean, that's just my own opinion.
And again, that may come for some opinion from you guys and council if it doesn't, impact the footprint of the park. But we are looking at other areas that weren't included in that original list, and that original list we feel will increase based purely on the survey that he got that through, right?
What do you guys think as far as the sidewalk that they're talking about? Because if you live in those the houses that are just west of the fire station, a lot of kids ride their bikes up, kids walk up that way, and you think you'd have some sort of a sidewalk that went down into the park, and they're all now just walking down the street here into the park. What's your thought about, as Gary said, Francis said, putting in some sort of a sidewalk there?
I think, you know, it'd be safer for the kids and, you know, I would personally be for it.
They do walk right up the driveway currently, so that's something that we can evaluate, bringing a sidewalk in.
So that's definitely on our list.
As a category, is there a general sidewalk category under which you could bullet point other sidewalks that either you would recommend need to be considered in a plan amendment?
Well, not so much sidewalks, but multi-use trails.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say
Multi-use
too.
trails. I think we got that, that's in the
That's
plan.
already taken care of.
That's in the plan.
What,
Well, remember when we voted for it to be
Yeah,
on the south end,
That's right.
Jacksonville Drive?
but it's not in the plan somewhere. We don't have multi-use trails anywhere other than the one that's on Jacksonville Drive is the only one that we've approved to date. We're
Right.
going to have further discussions about multi-use trails.
Well, that's fine. Multi-use trails / sidewalks.
Well, it's in this-
Categories, just to put it up there.
It's in this plan from 2011, but it didn't have, it's on.
Yeah, I was gonna ask
It's
about
on
that.
page.
Did that ever get built?
No, that's one of my
You're talking
questions
about
too.
the one that goes along
It's an or a north-south one, along the drainage ditch?
just along the drainage ditch, but it doesn't include all the other ones that we've been talking about.
No, that's a
whether it's
separate one.
It would just be an
But that
enhancement
one
to
was
that.
never built.
That one was never built, that's correct.
Correct.
And they were saying.
Any reason why?
The feedback that I had gotten when I questioned that was that there was too much in the way of, from the community feedback that they didn't want.
My understanding is it also required easements on non-city property around the
But there was
Paradise
good-
Key.
Well, so then, here's my thing on that then. So that was back in 2011. And now we're talking green spaces and green pathways and what have you. I think that should be readdressed. So maybe if we're going to make a category of sidewalks and trails, that gets reevaluated by the current residents and what have you, and readdressed into this plan as well.
So I know that Parks and Rec is working on a multi-use trail system for the whole city, and it does include the South Beach area. And when Jason shared it with me, and what I saw kind of pretty much covered everything that I was thinking would be appropriate to do down in that area. I don't know whether you're at a point where you're ready to start sharing that with everybody, but I
So
would think
that's
that's
out-
something we want to include into a plan and agree to that these are CR, a portion of it is CRA funded multi-use trails that would be appropriate to get started on as quickly as we can, and then let the city tie into to what's already been built by the CRA.
Were you gonna say something?
No, I was just gonna piggyback on what Mr. Pato was saying, that is out in RFQ to get a consultant on board. And I think it closes sometime at the end of this month, so within the next 6 weeks or so, we should, be nearer getting a consultant on.
Have we beaten up South Park?
No.
At this point, is there stuff on your list that just South
Well,
Park?
the only thing that I had, and I think it's being started to be addressed, but I would like to make sure we've got all of it covered, and that's more maintenance kinds of items, whether it's, what are we doing for the splash parks? What are we doing for the skate park? Do we have the funds in those areas sufficient to do a very good maintenance capability? I look at the skate park itself, and it needs some work right now. It's getting torn up, and we need to get in there and get some work done. Fencing around the basketball courts is another thing that we need to take a look at. The overall, and I know, Trevor, you're working on this one, which is the maintenance of all the landscaping and the lawns and things to that extent. There's so many dead plants out there. Desperately, we just need to get rid of them. We're paying for people to maintain dead plants right now, and that's not when we need to be
this is,
that would be a budget
you
discussion.
recall, that this is in our budget, and our discussion with Trevor and Jason is that they would look at saying even more was necessary, because these are ones that have been distributed
Yeah, I got it right
previously.
here.
Again, into here, it's easier.
So I can line up this.
Sure.
All right, so, can we just move now to just north of the park and keep the conversation going? So like, just north of the park,
Well,
remember,
Before you leave the park, let's make sure from his list we got everything
yeah.
that's in the park.
Well, we've talked about the community center. I'm sorry, I'm just going to take me a second to determine which ones are fall into which category here. I don't think any other ones.
Well, from memory, I think Gary has on his list, there is a, lot that has a waste station on it, or, it's kind of abandoned, it's over in the industrial area just north, which is still inside of our area, I think it's near 10th,
Well, you're talking on 9th Street,
9,
and it's roughly 2 or 3 blocks up.
right. So I think that's the only thing I think of us in the past talking about with purchasing lots or figuring out what to do with it.
Well, that's Beaches Energy property, and I did have a conversation with Director of Beaches Energy, Alan Putnam. And Alan indicated to me that, you know, they would not be interested in selling it at this point in time because they're not sure if there's a need in the future for it. But they would be interested in working with us to do something more in the way of landscaping, because right now there's a bunch of concrete block walls around it, plus a heavy concrete pad in there. Question is, can we remove those and do something nice in the way of landscaping that would be an amenity rather than a eyesore that we have right now?
So Jim, is that something that we would address in a document like this, saying?
That's a good
having
question.
purchased- I mean, would that be something we can even address?
I knew that they didn't want to dispose of the property.
Is that 9th
But-
Street just south of 16th Avenue North?
No, it's just further south than that. It's
Corner of Owen Ave.
It could be a part of a streetscape landscaping.
Here,
It could be part of a street landscaping concept on that road. But getting in and landscaping
Okay.
or
Just
doing
that one.
something on the Beaches Electric property itself might be a little bit iffy.
So I don't know, how do we address that? Do we put that as a bullet point to get an answer? Okay, so it gets, what's the bullet point? The bullet point is, figure out if, what, thank you for typing, because I don't know what's right.
Well, I mean, so what do we do in that situation? Do we put landscape on there and control it ourselves, or do we give them some sort of an incentive dollars so they can?
Oh,
Because
it's a city though.
it's Beaches
It's
Energy.
yeah.
This is why we have to investigate this. I mean, my initial thoughts are, yes, there could be a streetscape concept up there that would make it look better outside, but doing something on Beaches Electric property itself could be problematic.
So then, I kind of agree with Art though, would we need to like, I don't want to say field trip it, but go look and see if it requires maybe, if there's a lot of areas in the area, a lot of companies in the area, that we do an incentive plan for them to utilize said assets that we would provide them based off whatever we chose since we just adopted that book. I mean, I would prefer to see if it's even, I don't know, that's something we can, I guess, explore, but I think it should be in a,
Francis, you're hitting on something that, you know, I have a little bit of a, I guess, interest in that there's a lot of property in that, in the South Beach area that are city-owned right-of-ways, but I don't know who maintains them.
well, they had a discussion with us,
They're right-of-ways, but there's no pavement. As an example, on some of the streets that run east-west, just north of Osceola, they dead end before you get into Williams Street. And there's, you know, large areas of grass there.
did we see who replace those? No, those are different ones.
But and it happens throughout the district that there's a lot of right-of-ways that are not clearly defined and who's maintaining them. Somewhere we need to figure out what we're going to do with the right-of-ways.
I would say that probably falls under maintenance. I don't know if you guys agree or not, but from this document, I mean, Jim, you can tell me right or wrong, but I do think if in this document that we bring to the city council to approve, can we make a, paragraph of talking about beautification or incentive
Yes.
plans, whatnot, for any corridor deemed needing help by the council? I don't know, like, how would you word that, like,
Any corridor that we feel like needs to be enhanced, can we fund it?
something like that?
Well, I think the answer to that is,
I mean, I'm saying, can we put something like that in the document? Is
The
that
answer
too,
is
is that too broad?
it's not different than what we're talking about doing downtown with landscaping
Okay.
and maintenance.
So add
So
that
yes,
to
you
the
could do that, so
Okay.
you could consider that.
A beautification plan or something like
Beautification.
that.
Jeff?
Let me flip that around a little bit, because that's an issue, I think, is who has rights and responsibility for right-of-ways? Because at the Metropolitan years ago, you know, we have the stuff across the street from the Ritz. It's our main entrance. And we had just some overgrown grass and bricks and stuff. And we talked about, well, let's get a landscaper in and make it look nice, because that's our front door. And the response we got, well, we have to go to the city to get it approved, but they'll never approve it. So we just went ahead and did it. And so now, except for the corner on First Street, which is just a disaster because it's in the wind tunnel, we put in landscaping and bricks all along 3rd Avenue on the front of our building. And we maintain it, it looks pretty good. But there's other buildings where they don't do anything and the city doesn't do anything. So no one's maintaining the right of way. And what if, and I'll take our example a little bit further, what if the building decides they want to do some, you know, real right of way improvement? What's the rights, the legality of that, and then what does the city feel about it? You know, we just got right of ways all over that either are done or are not done. So, I don't know the answer.
That's an issue no matter where you go in the city. Everybody's got that right of way just outside their property, and some people take care of it, some people don't.
We do have what we call revocable right-of-way permits, so when a property owner wants to do those, they come actually to Public Works, bring in a plan of what they want to do, and then we will either approve or disapprove depending on what they want to do and what they want to construct in that right-of-way, whether that's, sometimes it's parking, sometimes it's pavers, sometimes it can be all kinds of a plethora of things. Anytime anybody wants to use city right-of-way to attach it to their property, we have a permit, or what we call a revocable right-of-way permit. It says, fine, go ahead and put your pavers in, but if the city's got to come in, we're going to rip them all out and it's not our problem. It's going to be yours to put it
Is
back
that
because
new?
it's yours, so.
Is
Public
that-
Works. Yep.
Yeah, but is that new?
No.
No, it's
Yes, we got bad advice.
So I have a
So we
question
just
on
went
that.
ahead and did it.
And that's very well could have happened. It very well could have been exactly what you said. Bad advice, they're not gonna ever approve that. That's not gonna fit with their plan, so just do it and ask for forgiveness if you get caught. We have a lot of places that do that. And we have a lot of places that when we catch them, we turn around and bring them back and say, hey, you gotta fill it all out to be able to get the revocable right-of-way permitting.
So question on that, if I don't mind, if
Sure.
you don't mind me asking. When you give approval for that, do you then have somewhere in your writing or your agreement that they are now responsible for maintaining it? And if you're, that's question one.
So the maintenance of any attached right-of-way to a property is already a city ordinance. It's covered in the Land Development Code that says, as a property owner, I have to maintain any right-of-ways that directly touch my property.
Okay.
So you have to mow it, you have to trim it, you have to do all that stuff. That's included as one of the pieces in the Land Development Code in the charter.
Okay, so
So-
go ahead.
What if the city wanted to do something that fit in with the general streetscape? This right of way in front of this person's building, we'd like to, you know, decorate or improve it or whatever. Can the city do that, or is it?
I would think the city would be able to do it, the same thing we're doing with the downtown beautification plans and the stuff we're talking about doing through Dix Height. That's very similar. It's a plan that identifies the right-of-ways and the improvements that are gonna be made in those right-of-ways. That's a little different scenario because it's you know, it's the plan, it's the city's beautification plan that's being adopted. if you wanted to improve the neighbor's building because it looks like garbage, that gets a little weird because we want that owner of that building has to be the one that signs the permit. He's got to be the one that agrees to the upkeep and the understanding that they own that particular improvement, so that if a water main break comes in and we got to rip all them bricks out of there when we're done, we're going to leave them a pile of bricks and they have to put them back. Is how it works. So like I said, if you wanted to improve the building next door, you could not necessarily do that, but you could work with the owner next door to say, look, you go get the permit, we're going to pay to do it, type of scenario. Yes.
And then final question, you say there's this ordinance that they have to maintain it. What's the standard? Is it just like nuisance, if you can't let it grow to 4 feet? Or can you mow your weeds and just leave it all weeds?
It gets very touchy because the inspections department doesn't necessarily like to enforce right away. It's very tough, but the ordinance actually does say, yes, you have to maintain it, but it doesn't specify what that means. It just, especially if you really dig into the land development code, it tells you can't let palmettos take it over. I mean, there's certain things that are called out specifically that you cannot do, but for the most part, I mean, if you mow the weeds, there's nothing that anybody's gonna do about it. It's still weeds, and that's still upkeeping it, you know?
Okay, because in my view, and I'll give a specific example, 2nd Avenue walking over here. The building next to you, they do a really good job on their lawn and landscaping, and it looks really nice. Across the street and along 2nd Avenue in front of the bricks, they resodded it once 5 years ago, and now it's all weeds. You know, if we want a good-looking city, we'd want the bricks to look like the guy across the street. You know, maybe something a little different because of traffic and stuff, pedestrian traffic. But how do we, you know, it looks crappy. And there's a lot of crappy-looking right-of-ways as you walk to City Hall.
It gets very tough because we manage the right-of-ways, and then inspections manages anything from the right-of-ways to the house. So that's a scenario where Heather and I are working, and Heather's group, you know, specifically George, are working together to try to figure out how to balance that. So, you know, can you go in and tell them to do it? I don't know that you can really do it unless it's a specific violation that they have that says, okay, you're not doing X, Y, Z, but you really can't make them go in and make it prettier because you think it's ugly.
And that's the problem. If we want to make the downtown look like Disney World, half the
Well, the
grass is
downtown
weeds.
right-of-ways, and not to cut you off, the downtown right-of-ways we have started maintaining. I know you can't see it, but in the last 3 weeks, we have rebuilt the irrigation from downtown all the way down 1st Street. We've rebuilt it all on 6th, 5th, we've started on 4th. It won't take long where all that'll be fully functioning. We're not gonna re-landscape it until we get the infrastructure fixed. Once I have all the irrigation running operational, those beds will all be maintained. All the right-of-ways that are landscaped, like the downtown areas, are part of the landscape maintenance contract we just put out. They will be maintained, and we are currently upgrading and repairing all the irrigation.
Okay, so would that include that little strip in front of the bricks that I was mentioning?
We'll have to go, if we go look and touch it, then yes. If it's outside the sidewalk, between the sidewalk and the road, and if it falls into downtown CRA, yeah.
You're talking about that 2 feet that runs about 23 feet long?
Well, it's more like 4 feet.
But yeah,
Yeah.
so.
And then, but you got the same situation on 2nd Avenue in front of the bank parking lot, or the auxiliary parking lot. You know, that's overgrown. Every once in a while it's been.
And that's where we found, we came down, we did 6th, we did 5th, we got to 4th, and I don't remember the name of the building on 4th decided to plant all hawthorns on top of our landscape. So now, whether we remove the hawthorns or go knock on the door and try and upgrade our irrigation, you know, that's something we're still working through, but if you give me a little more time, the downtown medians will be exactly how you want.
And maybe that's the word we need to get out with each of them, as we do each of the avenues and complete it, and we're getting ready to beautify them with new landscaping. Maybe it's something that Taylor can do and go and meet with businesses and let them know what we're going to be doing, and how can they help us, and how can they work with us to do their beautification at the same time, and have it all come together as one complete package, and do that avenue by looks great on, for one segment, and then all of a sudden, there's nothing, and there's many places where sidewalks just end and there's just vegetation there. Somehow we need to continue the sidewalks, complete them, and make them connect.
So can I bring this back to the south end since that's where we're talking? Sorry, I'm just taking over. Sorry, Art.
And I was getting ready to move on. We already said beautification for half an hour.
So, just with that new information now, and with the new information in the lot we were actually just talking about though, in that area, my only question is,
Where?
the Beaches Energy lots,
Yeah, yeah.
with the, and talking about the whole area and maybe doing a sense of, not knowing about this thing I did not know we had, that I like, easement, whatever. Can we do, can the two of them be combined when we make an agreement with people? You can beautify this area, you fill out that thing through the city, but here's our parameters, and you can only get, if you do these parameters, you can get funding from us. Is that like something that
Sure.
we can combine them?
It's not 12 bucks.
Okay, so I think that should be it. Okay, so is there anything else on that part of the beach, the industrial part of the beach, that we want to address in this plan?
Well, right now, so we're north of the park.
We're north of the park to the, and that's all the industrial, if you look at us.
And then the south end district just north of the park. Is there anything else on your list?
I don't know of anything else on the list. I mean, part of it is, again, multi-use trails, because some of them may happen in that area, but that would
Which we
be
added.
covered under the general topic of multi-use.
So then, may I jump to, I know that we have all those neighborhoods and stuff that they can kind of jump to from there, go to the Jacksonville Drive intersection where we own the lot, and there's that lot I've mentioned multiple times, those 3 lots I've mentioned multiple times. Do we ever get an answer on those lots? I mean, are you guys okay jumping to that section of the beach?
We discussed that, and I'm gonna throw it back to maybe Heather or Ashley, but, it was discussed, but I don't know.
Does anyone
I did bring it
know
up.
what's going on with those 3
I did
lots?
bring it up.
What is the question?
Do you remember the 3 lots? Francis, present your idea. We discussed this. There is the lot that could be a pocket park, and then there was those 3 lots. And as I recollect, your point was you would rather those lots become part of the park, and the pocket park itself be something for
Supporting it.
supporting it, parking. And that has been a point of discussion within the administration.
But we have not discussed it as a group.
But I don't think, maybe, but I'm saying, I brought that up to the administration, and it's a bit of an inconclusive conversation right now as to what they might want to have it considered or they want. And yes, I absolutely brought it up.
So then the question then for me to you all is, do we need to make any kind of concessions in the new document we present to City Council about that lot we own / or does this have to be pocket parks, and like, does the category need to be pocket parks and purchases? Like, how do we,
Purchases.
well, we would purchase that from the city. Those 3 lots we don't own, the city owns. Like, how do we address, because we just passed or just sent it to the council about how we're gonna purchase things finally, which we didn't have that in our agreements before. So now that we have this purchasing process, how, in this document, do we or how do we word
I would put pocket park development.
pocket park development?
See, I already purchased city lots, question mark. Development of pocket park, the particular location you're talking about, is potential parking support, and the other be development to a park. Put that on there for evaluation now, so that we know we can get that back.
But it'd be more like a general idea for us to discuss. Okay, does anyone else have a problem with that or want to add to that?
Is that only 3 lots?
It's 3 lots.
I think it's 3 lots.
Yeah.
It might be 5 actually, when I'm thinking about it, I think it's 5.
Yeah, we went and
I
looked
think
at
it's
it.
5.
We're talking about all that, right?
Yep.
On Sunshine Court, there's 5 lots, and I think the ones on Jack's Drive North, I think it's more than that, I think it's like 7.
Is it?
Yeah.
Well, whatever it is.
There's
That's
11 houses.
Now, and I know for a fact from the history, the city purchased those, so they could, or cut them out of the development because they did not want any driveways on Jacksonville Drive.
No driveway cuts. yeah.
So,
South
there's,
Beach Parkway.
South Beach Parkway.
South Beach Parkway, so,
And this-
that being the case, what else can you use said property for? And if you have that, and you're gonna take all that space and use it for parking, then you're utilizing most of it for something you can't really enjoy, so why don't we either give our lot to them to develop, or let's buy it from them, so we don't keep giving our money back to the city, but we're giving it to them for purchasing. That's the question. So I guess the question is can we buy it, one? And two, can we please add it in there so we can discuss developing it with Pocket Pocket?
That pocket park, yes, that's right.
And we don't have to talk about,
I was gonna say, you gotta be careful because you're backing right up against a bunch of people's homes.
and that's why it's gonna be more like serene, like that would be a community discussion too. That would be something you'd have to open up, but that's a whole different process.
And so what was the discussion from staff on this issue?
Present it to them, they're thinking about it.
And I'm just gonna say for reference, you guys, I did for 2 years, and I even put a presentation together that was supposed to be shared with you guys about it being Memorial Park, when all those memorial chairs and whatnot, because I even showed pictures of really nice fountains you can have in there, little walking trails that were covered, and it was a serene park. It was not a let your children run and scream and cry and have diapers everywhere. It was not one of those. So, especially since they rolled out that platform.
So your question is, can we buy the park?
Yes.
Can we buy the
Number
park?
one,
And then two, can we combine the two to do something?
but those aren't mutually exclusive. You can't buy it, but
Right.
still, you would want to have on the list of consideration development to some type of.
Right, which is what you get. So really be like 2 bullet points versus one with a sub-bullet point. That's correct. Okay. All right. Yeah.
Did we ask the question, did the CRA purchase that land and donate that to the city?
Not that many.
I don't know the history of those particular parcels. I know that the parcel on the intersection of South Beach Parkway and Jacksonville Drive, the southwest portion, the CRA
Okay.
purchased, but I'm not familiar with the northwest portion.
So those 2 questions we gotta ask, because we can't buy back something we already own. or
Correct.
paid to.
And if that's the case, then it would be us to decide, well, then do we get the city to take our lot so they can build something with the support lot to go with it? That would be I think they need to go hand in hand in my personal opinion, but that's my own vote, not all you. Okay, so in that general corridor, the only thing that we haven't talked about is, or that I know of in the past is we've already had the greenscape pathway going. That's already being taken care of, so we don't have to talk about that or add that, right? Because it's already part of theirs. Is there anything else on that whole strip, even going all the way back to?
Strip, I'm not trying to know what
You know where Jacksonville Drive is, and it goes past South Beach Parkway and goes deeper into the neighborhoods back
Yeah,
in
sure,
the
right, okay.
sanctuary area. Is there anything on your list for that general area?
It's just a question whether or not there's anything that we need to do along JTB.
Oh, that's the next place I was gonna go.
Which is, I'm not sure what the name of that street is right off the top of my head.
The one that comes off, or the one that?
No, the one that parallels JTB and then becomes the entrance ramp going on to JTB.
Yeah, that's the Marsh Landing.
No,
That's Sanctuary
One
Drive.
south.
Sanctuary.
The one south?
Sanctuary
Or
Parkway.
Sanctuary Parkway.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Whether or not anything needs to be done there in the way of improvements, more beautification than anything else.
The question is who owns that? Is that a state, is that?
I think it's FDOT.
Yeah, I think it is, because I think we had a discussion about it, especially with the overhang.
But they only own where that fence is, right?
I think they own that entire,
I think they own it.
frontage road
They own.
all the way to, if you go to where those intersections are, you'll see where the pavement changes. That's where they own to, because actually they own on the north side of that Sanctuary Parkway, on the intersections, when they come through all those other roads that feed into it, they actually own that piece right up to it. So that's all FDOT right away.
So there's nothing we can do.
No, I think we actually approached that a couple of years ago.
Yeah, if that's not gonna let you go put
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, we didn't talk about.
I looked
putting-
at that
I have
so
to
many
deal with that.
times.
I have to deal with that DOT all the time, please.
Yeah, I want to say we also talked about like painting and making a more beach feel or more welcoming feel on the actual the overpass, and because they own it, we couldn't do that either. And I think we also, and I will say this, and you guys, I don't know who was here, I don't know, maybe you were here, but you know when we bought the other lot that we have as our pocket lot, to make the road 3, and then you guys wanted to put a nice, pretty little like landscaping thing there instead of the little dividers that are ugly reflector dividers. We had a community come to us and saying, please, 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 please don't make it ugly. I remember the CRA specifically said, yes, we want something nice. That's not nice.
We'd like to get rid of them as well, so
So,
we'll support that
How
project
does that
100%.
happen?
Get rid of which?
Those stupid
The
reflector.
delineators that go between the 2 lanes of traffic, We would much rather have a space in there where you actually had a very high median.
It was originally designed with
But
a
we didn't
concrete
want
island.
but the CRA did not want to take up a whole lot, so the problem was is that we bought a house so that we can make more room for cars. And then the design came back where it took the whole purpose of that, the whole extra lane that was taken away with the median. So we were trying to find a solution that didn't take away the whole purpose of buying a house, right? So we said, no, we don't want to have that, but we do want some kind of dividers that are nice. And there were pictures, I mean, there's like big, like square blocks that you could have stuff in, or there was just nicer than these like wavy plastic things. So do we put that in our thing? Or is that already in ours?
Is that,
do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, the one thing about those that I did notice when they got put in is they got hit a lot. So
Yeah.
if we put anything nice there, it's gonna get hit.
But can't they be not those? They look like fishing lures.
Is-
And I'm like,
is that FDOT or Jack's?
no, that's us. We pay for it.
We have them a couple of different places. We have them on Osceola as well, right there. And yes, as far as public works go, yeah, we'd love to get rid of them, because they're a pain in our butts as much as they are yours. Because people decide to turn left when they don't want to, so they wipe out 5 of them, and we're out there replacing 5 of them, and then they're, so I mean, yes, they.
But can't there be nicer looking ones?
Well, you can come up with some ideas for us
Yeah.
on that.
I mean,
Put it on the list. Put it on the list.
Please put,
I don't even know how to get.
Just
rid
put
of those
eliminate
people.
delineators.
I would say get rid of.
What are they called, Delaney?
Replace delineators with something better. There you go, close enough. That's it.
Get rid of, what did it say, get rid of car things.
Get rid of, yeah, that'll work.
Wavy.
So since we know for that area, we can't paint and beautify the overpass unless we learn to deal with DOT. We know we can't beautify or landscape the space that we've been talking
You
about.
say we can't do it, but, you go and you take a look at some of the other things that DOT has done. As an example, Town Center Parkway, it goes under 295.
Yes.
They've done some landscaping and stuff under that underpass and around the edges of it. So why can't we have some conversations with DOT to see what can be done? I mean, I think we're so quick to say we can't do things rather than taking a little bit of time and investigating and seeing whether or not we can do some things. And hopefully, maybe I'm wrong and we can't do them, but, there's
Well,
only.
I'm just saying can't, and I don't wanna argue about it, but I'm just saying, being on the board for as long as I have, and every year we brought it up, at some point you say, fine, we can't do it. That is on me. I don't mean can't. I would love if you wouldn't mind researching that, so I take that. But I'm just saying, historically,
There
they
was
say
an
no.
item, I think it was in conversation, Jason, just out of curiosity, we had a conversation about the dead, you mentioned to me, the dead pound in the center of 3rd Street. You were gonna, we can't do anything, we can't put any other kind of tree back, but after some conversation, you said you're gonna have a conversation with DOT and see whether or not we can put something other than a pound back in that location. I don't know what you found out in reference to that.
Yeah, I didn't take it any further, Mr. Pater. We did have a conversation, but I need to follow up on that, I'm sorry.
Okay, well, that's fine, it's just.
Let me talk about FDOT. Do I think that is possible? But you're gonna have to be really, really patient, and there will have to be an agreement for somebody else to maintain them, because FDOT does not maintain landscaping, except maybe once every 2 years.
And I'm fine with that
I'm
too.
just saying,
And maybe
but it is a
sometimes
process.
people
It is a process that will take a lot of time.
Which now we have municipal help for, and before we only had 20% of one person's time who didn't want, I'm sorry, it's on record, but didn't want to approach that.
Stop it.
So
If
maybe,
there's an idea what has to be done,
that might be why I feel like we can't. And I'm happy, I would be delighted, because I also presented a whole bunch of painting stuff and a lot of welcoming things for the whole intersection.
some of that can be done. Can I make a suggestion about FDOT? And you can put that up on the list. If there are items, whether it's doing art on the intersection, or whether it's landscaping, if we can define exactly what it is that you would like, I'd be glad to call the main guy and get him to come out here and look at it. And it can work. I will give you an example of that. Now, granted, Taylor will confirm this. It's taken 4 years, but bringing Jim out up to Atlantic Beach and Neptune Beach has caused and resulted in plans ultimately to create a complete streets on Mayport Road going right there. I believe me. It's been, what, 4 years, 5 years?
And it's just now in the plans,
And
it's
it's
not
just now in
under
the plan,
construction
it's not
yet.
funded. But in this case, I don't think you're talking about asking them to fund it, but it's still a process that you have to go through. That's what I'm saying. With FDOT, you gotta be patient.
All right, I know that we're getting close to time.
Just
Yeah, we wanna-
DOT.
I don't think we're gonna talk
It's
about-
all,
So the only, I know you have a lot more space, but the only other place I think we need to address is, at least in this plan right off the bat, is, the shopping center. All the non-used parking, what are requirements on it, how do we bring more, involvement? Because if we make that area a destination place, then our greenscapes will make that a destination space for what they're doing. So I guess my question to you all is how, do we have ideas for that area, and what can we, or
Let me
can we
jump in.
not do?
I'm not sure that this needs to be on the list except as a task.
Okay,
Those two shopping centers are owned by two of the largest real estate developers in the country,
okay,
Slayman and Regency. Regency is publicly traded. They are very, very clear in what they want to do. There potentially could be some type of meeting planning session with Regency, not their
okay.
broker that's trying to lease space, and Slayman and his people. We're close to both, folks that are really good people that if you would like to have a conversation with them about their plans and about ways and means, that can be established as a task.
Now, are we allowed to have said conflict, because you know, our rights and whatnot are,
Yeah, I
they're
mean,
there, but they weren't there, so I guess the
they
question
can do
is,
what they want to do. The question is, you want to.
are we allowed to have
Why
said
can't you have a conversation?
conversation?
What do you want to have a conversation? To me, it's more about, what are your plans for the center, how it can work, you want to make it look better, you don't want it to decay, deteriorate, which happens to so many maturing centers.
But see, that area though, then would be maybe, it might be one of those where we use our toolbox with them and give ideas, so can we at least
I have to
add
be honest
that?
with you, using a toolbox for huge developers like that bothers me a lot.
Well, I'm just curious, like, I'm trying to figure out, how can we address that, or do we have to address that in this document?
I don't think it has to be the document, I think that's just a task to sit down and
Okay,
talk
well then
about.
let's just add that to our task.
I think your
list then.
focus should be not necessarily fixing either one of those shopping centers, because as Jim says, there is no lack of funding for those guys to do whatever they want to do there. You may want to be looking more towards walkability, like how do people get from the different subdivisions to those, how to get to Home Depot, how to get to Bed Bath & Beyond. You know, do you put in a multi-use sidewalk, you know, beautiful landscaping, all that kind of stuff, more lights, more security, all of that stuff is what we need to focus on.
Right, which is what's already part of the city plan that they're working on. Okay, that's all, I just wanna make sure we address it.
Behind Staples, there's a box culvert that opens up and then becomes a box culvert again as it goes under JTB. Who's responsible for maintaining that area?
We are.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think it's ours.
There's a big double stormwater pipe that goes under Home Depot and under the parking lot and under Staples.
We just redid all that.
Well,
Yeah, we do all of that.
but there's a lot of growth in that opened area between the two box culverts for the one that occurs under Staples and then before it goes under JTB, there's an open area in there. If you drive back behind it, you'll see what I'm referring to. And there's a lot of vegetation growth and stuff in there that really needs to be cleaned
Does
out.
anybody ever see them?
That's more about a flow, I would think.
I'm talking about,
Well, you have to go down an alley in order to
So that's something.
I'm sorry.
You have to go down an alley in order to see it.
The backs of the stores.
Yeah, but no one ever
That
goes
goes
there.
down and
Yeah,
it's up.
well, I'm sorry, I'm not understanding your point.
Well, why spend money to maintain something that no one ever sees?
Because it's the stormwater flow for the whole north area
Double channels.
of the South Beach.
Oh, so you're saying that's for beauty, but for function?
Yeah.
Cause you know, we just did all those other sides, and remember, they hadn't cleaned them out in 20 years, we're like, well, why can't we have a maintenance plan? I would agree with that.
I misunderstood the
Yeah.
point. I thought,
No, there's just a, I can show you something.
no, I,
So curious, anything else on that list that deals with South End, cause, you know, we were supposed to be out here at 7 and,
Signage and so forth.
oh, okay.
Is one that has been brought up and have been brought up by certain council members too about improving signage in the area down there and getting a better quality level of signage. Some of it is done in some of the intersections like Jacksonville Drive and South Beach, the signage is much, it's much better than what you typically see on the streets. But if we can improve signage down there, I think that would be a great
Do
benefit.
you put that on our list too? Like,
Street signage
um,
specifically?
how did they word it in our downtown area? What sign?
Wayfaring.
Wayfaring? We can't use the same terminology.
Why not?
That can't, I'm asking. That was like where we can't, like, sorry.
What signs are we talking about?
All types of signage, all the street signs,
I mean, aren't the street signs consistent throughout the city?
I took it as, I don't know, I know you're asking because I took what he said as if we're building, let's say, park signage there, if we have, you know, like, I would think more park signs and like pathway signs. I didn't think anything like road
Park
signs.
signs and fire station signs and things like that, I get that, the street signs.
I wouldn't do
That's
street signs.
completely not same, right?
That's completely the same everywhere, but what kind of signs were you thinking?
it's not see already, I've.
Are you talking like the
city was
green
trying-
ones, like that?
I'm sorry,
You talking like the green signs?
yeah,
Those aren't, those are standard across everywhere.
they're standard across everywhere, they're different at different intersections, but that's consistent across the city.
Really? I honestly have never noticed that.
Of course, I know they should be.
I thought they had to be
Do
consistently
we do something in
green.
the way of signage at the entrance to Jack's Beach down there? You know, right now there's a, so to speak, a green wall with some lettering on it that says Jacksonville Beach.
Huh.
Do we want to do something more? It's a little bit outside the area
You
because it's
talking about Third Street?
on the east side of 3rd Street.
It's not our district.
It's just outside.
It's outside the district.
Yeah, but do we do
Oh, you're talking about the
something?
green wall that says interest to, you're like, welcome to Jack's Beach, that one.
Yeah.
Yes, that one's not in our I see what you're saying, but
But I'm just asking you whether or not there's something we want to do down there that might improve identification of Jack's Beach.
well, we got it on our list.
Like a welcome
We can
sign?
talk about it.
Street signs won't really necessarily be a part of this. That's
Yeah.
just we work our way through the city and replace those,
This is more,
depending on where they're called out as.
this is more like identification and welcoming
Branding.
stuff, branding. I like that, branding, that's good. All right, Art, are we gonna continue the conversation going to downtown? I feel like
We're not gonna go to downtown, let's finish in the south end and we can shut it down for the day.
unless there was something else on here, was there something else on here? Oh, no, that was it. I mean,
Are we gonna have another workshop for the
We're gonna
just
have to.
downtown?
We can do that. I mean, we'll schedule that one after our meeting on Monday. 2 weeks.
all right, so
Gary,
we have to
anything else on your list that we haven't gone through yet? So then we don't have to hear about this list anymore again? Let's go through the list.
Listen to it anymore.
No. Let's make sure we go through it.
Art, you know, if you don't want to listen to it, then.
Gary, let's make sure we go through everything on your list. We're here now. If there's something we haven't done yet,
One of the items that seems to be prevalent in both areas is that the utility boxes by the different service providers, many of them are broken. I know it looks like somebody's been through the downtown area and has started repairing some of those. But I think as an overall program throughout the city, whether it's Comcast or whoever, needs to repair their utility boxes.
Is that something you guys monitor? I think that's
We-
gonna be a call, just a phone call to them to tell them we expect it.
We monitor their permits when they're installing those cables, but beyond the initial installation, yeah, that's, I mean, and all I can say is that will be a uphill battle. It'll be pushing wet noodles uphill 100% to get,
Good luck on that.
to get AT&T and Comcast to come in and
Because
change
they
out
own
their
it, right?
boxes to make them prettier.
Because they own those, right?
That's all their facility.
So we don't have any control of them, but we can say, hey, it's out of disrepair, it's rusted, it's what, we can do that. So that's be more like
We can try to do that, yes.
Well,
is
we
that
don't
code
need-
enforcement?
I think we should, yeah.
No.
I think it should be, would it not be code enforcement? Then would it just be us walking around and then giving you a list? Who do we give the list to? That's the question.
Yeah, Comcast,
You'd have to go back to
AT&T.
Comcast.
I mean, that's the bad thing is we can't, yeah, we only have the people that are installing as the only contacts we have. That's kind of like, we've got the AT&T building kind of up on the north side that they've now abandoned and left on. Well, we've got to contact the property owners to come out and clean up all the, the garbage and stuff that all gets left over time because they've completely abandoned their local building even. So, I mean, yes, we can make the request, and if you get a list, or if you get a specific one, by all means, email them to me. I'll be more than happy to push them on to our AT&T and our Comcast contacts. I'm just trying to, you think FDOT works slow?
Bingo.
Good luck.
Well, I think it's on a list now for Gary, like, I think she has on a list, so she can make that like a
Yeah.
priority.
What about amending the city code to make it something that code enforcement can enforce?
That's a possibility. We are systematically working through all parts of the charter and code, very, very much can be. I mean,
Because that,
So then should we put that wouldn't be something we put in this document,
No, that's
right?
something we
That's-
propose
that's-
to city
that's-
council.
Page obvious, you can't
Put next to your bullet
to stop
point,
that.
put next to your bullet point,
I mean-
explore code adjustment.
we do have some power, because yes, exactly what you're saying is true. When they want to install a new line, they're at our office to try to file permits, and I can look at them and say, you know, you gotta fix this, this, and this, or we're not gonna let you do this, but, you know.
Put up the 5G,
yeah. Well,
5G things on the
that's, that, we
phone.
don't even want to talk about that.
No, I don't wanna
But
talk
yeah,
about it,
it's,
but that's
it's,
another
it's,
story.
yeah, it's, we can ask, and if we can provide them a list, I think it'd be a little bit better off, and a list especially with some pictures, that even makes it better. You know, because a picture's worth 1,000 words, you gotta remember these people are not here.
Right.
So you send them a picture and an address and say, this is what it looks like, this looks bad, we need it fixed. Hopefully they're gonna take that and be able to come do it, and we can hopefully try to ask our people that we work with to try to work with us for it.
That's just political arm turning.
Yeah.
It is.
They're gonna be in front of an elected official's office and they're gonna say, hey, you know, I got this in my district. And it's gonna be fixed the next day.
Yeah. And I think that's
But
good.
that's
So-
how it gets done.
But the fact that you
Strictly
guys have all
political.
heard it, at least you know when it comes up, and I think that when we ever talk about any kind of code stuff, it's still on that list for code adjustment.
The AT&T got rail guy for the region, listen, Black Beach, so there you go.
Gary, what else you got?
Do we need to look at, in general, street lighting in the South Beach area? As to,
Isn't
let's
it
say,
part of the whole, like, is the city doing the whole lighting?
I don't know.
We're doing lighting downtown, but I don't know about it, so.
Aren't they doing that as part of the path plan, like the greenscape path, or they have a lighting plan with that, right? For their sidewalk, or their biking, or their greenscape path, didn't I see something about lighting?
So
Low
we
lighting.
anticipate the consultant will include in the plan, you know, rest areas, lighting, and other amenities along with the park.
And I assume that one of the reasons this original biking plan and whatnot didn't work, other than the fact that it, you know, people were against it, but one of the big reasons they were against it was because they didn't want lighting in their backyards. That pretty much,
Yeah, well, I just didn't know that, you know, from a safety standpoint, whether or not, particularly if we're putting pedestrian ways and things, whether or not we want to take a look at, you know, improving the lighting, sidewalk lighting and things to that extent.
I think it's on their agenda, actually,
Marsh Landing Parkway
by the city.
by Chick-fil-A. Somehow, you know, maybe we need to talk to the developer there, but the traffic backup at Chick-fil-A is unreal to the point where it's preventing the flow of traffic down Marsh Landing Parkway. And I don't know if there's some road improvements that need to be done to help facilitate, but it's largely due to the fact that Chick-fil-A has such a volume of business that goes in there, particularly at lunchtime and in the evening hours, that it backs all the way up onto Marsh Landing Parkway and then prevents traffic from flowing on through.
It's not any different than any Dunkin' Donuts or any Starbucks as well. I mean, if you really, you gotta be careful, you open that door to say, and that comes back unfortunately to our officers in the back, if you don't want them parking on those main roads to wait to get in, we gotta keep the traffic moving, you can't sit there, but unfortunately, I don't know that there's anything we can do as far as say, you gotta have a bigger drive-through queue, or, I mean,
The only thing
Kind
you
of.
really do is make them run around the building and not out to the street.
yeah,
I mean,
it's,
because there's plenty of empty parking lot, you know, back behind
And
Chick-fil-A.
I agree with you that, you know, it's bringing them in differently rather than on Marsh Landing Parkway, but right now it's creating a significant traffic issue down there.
How would
I'm
you
just trying to find a way to, you know,
Just need another
make it
Chick-fil-A.
a little bit more.
Just brainstorm-wise, how would you even address something like that? I don't even know how you would address that with Chick-fil-A. That's
you'd
gotta be like
have to take their entrance away, and make it an exit only. And as you come out, it would be a right turn only to leave Chick-fil-A, and then you would have to enter the complex and go into a queue to go into Chick-fil-A.
Because that entranceway is the only main entranceway really into that area on that side of that drive. So doing that, you basically turn that, you would kill the whole, all the stores back there would have.
That'd be something to explore, because then you'd end up on the west side of that, where Pier 1 used to be, that would end up being
The main point for most people, and that could get pretty congested then too.
that's something to think about.
That's one of those hard things when you start talking about that. That comes back to the business development piece of it from the beginning. And do you want to squash something that you know is just not going to work because of traffic from the very beginning? I had the same situation. I had a Dunkin' Donuts say they were going to be on a particular corner. And I said, that's the worst corner. I don't know what you're thinking. And I did everything I could to make the traffic the best, and it still ended up being completely horrible. Backed up a hill, you know, I mean, it was very, very bad. And the answer was Dunkin' Donuts' theory from the very beginning is they want to draw traffic right in and right out. So they take those traffic patterns and they want to pick the corner where you can turn right to get in and you can turn right to get right back out. They're not worried about the people going the other direction because they're not going to cross.
Right.
The people they capitalize on are everybody that can turn right to get in and everybody that can turn right to get back on and go back on their way to work. And so they focus their plan from the very beginning on what meets that. And Chick-fil-A is just its oddity from the beginning is I don't think I've seen one yet that's been designed to handle the capacity that they actually draw.
We're having the same issue on Beach Boulevard, the Wonderbird, and even on Taco Hill on some nights. Just how packed it is and we want to see it at the same time.
It's funny, I went to Chick-fil-A on Sunday and there was more.
You could get right in, couldn't you?
Across the street from Chick-fil-A, somebody else had mentioned it, there, you had just filled in or covered box culvert that was constructed there. What happens with all that property? What do we do with that? Are we just going to leave it as is, or are we going to maybe create some kind of a park there? I don't know.
I mean, for maintenance purposes, we don't want to have anything installed on top of it in case we ever have to go back in and crack into that double box culvert that was put in there. But by all means, I mean, Jason does pretty landscaping. We landscape with brush hogs. So it's a different scenario as to whose department. I mean, that's why I say right now it's upkept by Public Works, which means we go in with a brush hog and we hog it down and be done. If you want it to look pretty, then you got to talk to Jason. If you want it to just be cut, that's us. If you want to utilize it for something, I don't know that we would be against that as an opportunity. I don't know what we would be able to utilize. You can't put parking lot on it. You can't, there's certain things you wouldn't want to do. But
just brainstorm.
Is that addressing, does the biking trail you're working on go in that area? Like the greenscaping
between JTB and Marsh Landing Parkway.
Basically,
Whose right of way is
Chick-fil-A.
It's ours.
So that space, does a biking trail go into that direction at all?
I can't remember, Ms. Popolowski. I don't want to say yes, it does. I know I gave Mr. Patel a map of it. I just can't.
I don't think we identified it simply because it's too hard to get to because you've either got to get to it from South Beach Parkway, which is a very bad intersection for people to be trying to cross under JTB to get across to it.
Right.
And I don't think there was any way to get back the other direction on the other end of it. So I don't think we identified it, at least in what we preliminarily did on the urban trails. But like I said, that's where the consultant, they're the ones that do it. I mean.
How big is the space?
Oh, it's,
Gary, do you know?
oh my gosh, it's
How big is it? The space?
60, 70 foot wide probably, maybe even 100 foot plus
I'll
the entire
box-
length.
I'll the box question then.
And just because I didn't even know this place was existent, and I'm sorry that I'm pushing the 7 o'clock hour.
So, I know we don't own the parking lot and all that development's back there. But I know that our current administration is trying to go green and bring more electrical car parking spaces. Is it big enough for the city to turn that into the electrical parking for that area?
I think you'll run into the classic Walmart scenario where your green people aren't going to park there and walk half a mile to get to Target or wherever they're trying to go to.
Well, Chick-fil-A's right across the
I
street.
mean, Yeah, but if they're going there, yeah, but that, I mean, but the other thing is, like I said, we gotta remember, we've got that double box culvert that's underneath it, and we wanna be very, very considerate of what we build on top of it,
That
cause,
makes sense,
you
I'm glad
know.
you said that. So what do we do with that, Jim? Do we add that to our list of things to explore? Or does it fall underneath the purchasing of, no, we already own it. So it just needs to be its own.
You need to put that in there because that's a specific site that you'd like to have stored. If you're talking about that right away,
Yeah.
cross city
I don't know how to
right.
word that,
I
though.
don't know, this is the right of way.
What would you call, what box would you call it? What box?
Double box.
Between JTB and
Double
Marsh
box.
Landing Parkway.
So it would be double box park, question mark? I don't know what else to do.
Stumping me, Brent.
Sorry.
Oh,
Gary, what else is on there?
If it's gonna be that creative, we gotta call it something similar to what's in the plan, cause it was all built under the plan, so we gotta call it Project 3C Phase 4.5.
We'll come up with a better.
See, I don't know where you wanna go with it, but it's
I don't
somewhere
know
in there.
either. We'll fix that.
Maybe it turns into Chick-fil-A's outdoor seating. Seriously, the outside part.
You got a big 4-lane road though.
Oh, you know. They'll have a crossing guard, you know they would.
Yeah.
All right, guys, it's 7 o'clock. It's my bewitching hour.
It's been a really good meeting.
And we are definitely on 2 weeks, and we're at 3 o'clock.
We're at 3 o'clock. Mark it on your calendars.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, we have, what,
And then Jim, that means already filled, as far as our clients are concerned.
the two big demands.
But I thought that was to talk about this.
So we go back to grab those,
Fill
give
in
them
the
to
lights.
free week, and then if we miss anything,
Now,
they either
I
put
can't
on the
guarantee you
side or.
all that stuff does time for
Hey, guys,
But it doesn't mean we can't get.
we're adjourned, but they have some information they want to give us for our meeting on the 26th.
Yeah, just give us a second to grab that.
So then, like,